I'm Gina Duvernay, Adult Services Manager with Gwinnett County Public Library, and we're all happy to have you here. Adult Services puts all these author talks on for the library. Amy Perry is here, Miriam Mayer is somewhere. That's our small team, and we do mighty work. And we can only do it because you show up here, so thank you. Tonight we also have the Bookbird from Avondale Estates here, and there are books for sale. So if you need a copy, you can go over there and grab one, and we'll have a book signing afterwards. But I'll go ahead and just read our bios of our tonight's featured author and moderator. So moderating the talk today is author extraordinaire, Kimberly Brock. She's an award-winning author of The Fabled Earth, featured as a must-read in fall of 2024 by Town and Country magazine, and The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare, which spent 3 weeks on the Southern Independent Booksellers bestsellers list. Both novels have been shortlisted for the prestigious Townsend Prize for Fiction. Her debut novel, The River Witch, was the recipient of the Georgia Author of the Year Award. The former actor and special needs educator is the founder of Tinderbox Writers Workshop. A native of North Georgia, Kimberly now lives near Atlanta, where she is at work on her 4th novel. And tonight we are happy to have our featured author, Robert Gwaltney, 2023 Georgia Author of the Year for first novel. Is a writer of fiction, of Southern fiction. He resides in Atlanta, Georgia, where he is an active member of the Atlanta literary community. By day, he serves as vice president of Easter Seals North Georgia, Inc., Children's Services, a nonprofit supporting children with disabilities and other special needs. Robert's work has appeared in such publications as the Southern Literary Review, the Blue Mountain Review, the Signal Mountain Review, and the Dead Mule School of Southern Literature. Robert is also a contributing writer for the Well-Read magazine and podcast host of Inside Voices. His debut novel, The Cicada Tree, was awarded the Somerset Award for Literary Fiction. Please let's give them a round of applause.
Hello, brave people, brave Atlanta traffic to get here tonight. They do not know what they are in for. Robert and I got to know one another a few years ago, and now we cannot stay off the telephone. It's like, I can remember when I was a kid and my grandmother had a party line on her telephone, and we would listen in on the neighbors talking. And when Robert and I get on the phone, my husband will say, "You're on the phone with Robert Gwaltney." And he can tell because my accent just gets worse and worse and worse because we are Southern to the core,
We
aren't
are.
we?
Absolutely.
So I'm excited to be here with you tonight. We always kind of joke too that we got to be friends, and I had won that Georgia Author of the Year award, and I always laugh about it. So I wonder how in the world that ever happened. Not something I thought would ever happen to me. And then I was in a bookstore with him while you were speaking about this book when you found out you had won.
Yep.
And I was like, "You're welcome."
I know.
Because we're friends, right?
Pass
Made this
the torch.
happen, right? So Cicada Tree, when I found out about Cicada Tree, I was excited. And it's part of the reason that I introduced myself to Robert, because we both love Southern Gothic. We like writing about the South with a little creepy on the side, right? A little crazy on the side too. And I can't see it any other way. And when we sit down to talk about the books that we're working on, usually we don't know what the other person is working on. I don't tell anybody, right?
Yeah.
For a long time
You're
until
very
the
quiet about
idea
it.
is like cooked. And then at some point I'll have to tell somebody. And there's only a couple, 2 or 3 people I talk to. And we have found that every time we have that conversation, I start to worry he'll think that I know what he is writing about, because we're like writing about the same things and they come out so differently.
Right.
But it's very interesting. We were just at, where were we? Where was that? Baton Rouge?
Virginia.
Virginia, Festival of the Book. And we were sitting at the airport the next morning because our flight back to Atlanta was the same. So we had breakfast and we were talking about what I'm working on now and what he's working on now. And it was bizarre. We laughed the whole time because it's the same things.
Exactly. Well, the Fabled Earth takes place, on Cumberland Island. My next novel takes place on the Georgia coastal barrier island. But it's funny, we see the world through similar things, I
Right.
think, but we just tell the stories very differently.
So it's a lot of fun. It's like um, we're kind of best friends in that
Right.
way
Absolutely.
because we're thinking about the same stuff and we're obsessed with the same things. So it makes us weirdos together
It
instead of
does.
weirdos
I
alone.
know. It's like
right?
I can say, "Oh my God, Kimberly, you are so weird," and then she'll say it
Say,
back.
I know, it's so great.
know.
Isn't it fun to be weird? So let's talk about the cicada
Okay.
tree. Let's start and have you tell us what's your elevator pitch for the cicada tree.
Elevator pitches. I had an opportunity to speak with some writers this weekend, and we were talking about elevator pitches. And I'd rather write an entire novel than have to summarize a 100,000
Absolutely. Ooh,
word
and I had
book.
to go behind you. We had tables that rotated. And so he was in front of me, and then I was the next person to follow him every
It was
time we
speed
switched to a
dating.
new table. I said, "Oh man, I'm behind Robert Gwaltney. Who wants to follow that?" Your
You're
stories
sweet.
are so good. Tell us
Well,
about it.
thank you. So, the cicada tree. So, this is the elevator pitch. The summer of 1956, Annalise Newell, a whiskey drinking piano prodigy, encounters the wealthy Mayfield family, a family possessing a supernatural beauty others refer to as that Mayfield shine. It's this initial encounter that takes Annalise down a dark path of obsession, playing dangerous games in the throes of manipulation, all of it culminating in a cataclysmic plague of cicadas. So I always like to end by saying it's a feel-good book.
Right. Well, the whiskey makes it
The
feel
whiskey,
good, right?
yeah.
I've got to tell you my cicada stories later. Maybe not here. Where in the world did you come up? This question made me laugh. Where did you come up with this idea? I kind of want to know. I kind of don't.
Yeah, well, so the cicada tree actually was birthed out of another book that I was working on. It was going to take place in 1970. It was going to be told from the perspective of an 11-year-old boy. His name was Banks Darlington, and his mother was named Annalise Newell Darlington. And I was several chapters in. The 11-year-old boy was seeming too much like me, and I was feeling like, I don't really want to tell a story about me. But his mother was really starting to shine on the page. She was making these horrible parenting decisions, which made her fascinating. She was doing awful things. And so I just began to ask her, what must you have been like as a child for you to be like this as an adult? And that really took me back to 1956 to Annalise Newell, who was the protagonist in The Cicada Tree. And that's really how the story came to be.
Oh man, you answered a bunch of my
I know.
questions. You know, I write children. I always have characters that are children, and they're so easy for me. I don't know what that is. I think I was a very precocious child, and I imagine that about you too. So like I was very aware even as a little kid, and so my characters that I write as children are very aware, and they're easy to write because I remember that period in my life so well. But it is amazing to me that you chose to write from a little girl's perspective, and you do it very successfully. But I
Thank you.
want to know about that. How did you do that?
Well, I think that was one of the things that I was most worried about when the book first came out, that the world has changed so much. People are very critical, hypercritical of many things. I was worried that I wouldn't be given the grace to have been able to have told a story from the point of view of an 11-year-old girl. But, as I stated earlier, I initially was going to tell a story of an 11-year-old boy, but it just seemed to me to be more organic to tell the story from Annalise Newell's perspective. I think, first of all, I feel a great emotional connection with women. I grew up with strong female influences in my life. My mother, my grandmothers. I had a lot of, if in childhood, I had a lot of friends that were girls. I always wanted to be in the places where the women were, where they gathered, because their stories were so much more interesting than what the men were discussing, which was little to nothing. And the women would, it was just fascinating to me at family events to be able to sort of linger and to find out so much, and just immense storytellers, these women that I grew up with. So it seemed like a natural thing for me to do. I felt, connected on an emotional spectrum with women in a way that I felt that I could do it with great respect and care.
That's so interesting. We've never talked about this. And that makes me think about the voice in your head, the storyteller in your head from when you're growing up. And if that voice is female, if that's how you hear the story, that's interesting.
It is, and I think that also some of my favorite characters, well, probably almost all of my favorite characters in fiction are women. And I think that some of my characters in film, I was a huge admirer of films from the 30s and 40s, which, that was a period of time where there were huge, significant, strong female protagonists. So I think that's just part of my DNA.
I like it. And so, would you read a little bit so we can
Sure.
hear that voice?
And I'm not going to read from the book because I'm getting older and the eyes aren't quite what they used to be. So it'll be a little easier from this. So I'm going to read from, I should have played hard to get, oh no, I can't read.
We know better,
No,
Robert.
me read?
Come on, Robert. You can do
I
it.
can do it. Thank you. So this is the second scene of chapter 1, and it's the protagonist, Annalise Newell, who's sitting alongside a piano with her young friend, Etta Mae Johnston, who has this remarkable singing voice. And
The names, your names, your characters. We're going to talk about that.
Okay, the naming of people. The sky boomed, rattling the walls of our clapboard house, jostling the windows in their shoddy frames. Etta Mae and I passed the hour at Daddy's old upright, attempting to rehearse the stranger's funeral song. Etta Mae's gift was singing, and mine the piano, each of us the perfect accompaniment to the other. Though I never played it before, Stormy Weather was the only song my heart could remember, as though it were the only song that ever was. I always had known how to play, where my fingers should go, an instinct planted way down deep, just as easy as breathing. Daddy had thought it had been he who taught me, but I knew long before, back before I first opened my eyes to the world. It was easy pretending, just a little lie, a reason to be close, if just for a spell. But that was when he loved us, Mama and me, back before he drank all the good away. Sure is pretty, Miss Wessie hollered from the kitchen. The two of you could coax an angel right down from heaven. Don't it make you sad, I said, singing to dead folks? She sucked in her bottom lip, then let it loose. No, not really. She cast her green-flecked eyes down at her hands, running them the length of her fingers. But I knew the truth of it. Somewhere in that deep-down spot where the music lived and swirled, I knew when she sang for her poor sweet mama. Percussion rolled above us, vibrating the floorboards. Piano keys shivered. Everywhere was music, even in the clink of Mama's jelly jar vase. Could the others hear it too? Or was it meant only for me? Wish I could go with you, I said, my voice sounding peculiar amidst the storm's refrain. Me too, Etta Mae said, sitting down next to me on the piano bench, leaning her head against my shoulder. But you get to go to the Mayfields. She feathered her fingers across my arm. Folks say the whole town could fit right inside their house. I guess, I said, contemplating the size of such a place, the place Mama went on Saturdays to earn extra money. Maybe you could play with Marlissa. Marlissa, such a pretty name, the sound of it a melodic whisper. I poked gently at the cicada shell hidden inside my pocket. In truth, I knew very little of the Mayfields or their daughter Marlissa. Mama never spoke of them, and I had yet to see one up close and in the flesh. Only the passing of their long black car through town, the world caught and reflected in the sheen of its darkened windows. One more time, Miss Wessie said from the kitchen, then it's dressing time. The rain dissipated, the weight of Miss Wessie's feet across the floorboards audible once more. Etta Mae lifted her head from my shoulder. The cicada shell shifted in my pocket, the sharp tips of its legs sticking into my skin, grabbing hold around my finger. I flicked at the thing until it turned loose, my fingers finding their place on the keys. Etta Mae did not wait for my music, finding the song within her without the help of a single note of mine. I pulled my hands from the piano and listened, sorrow seeping from the perfect pitch of her soprano. I sat, eyes shut, letting her enchantment settle over me, feeling a tingle just under my skin, the weight of the thing growing until it sat heavy, pressing against my insides, until there was nothing left for me to do but cry. Rain fell against the tin, at first a smattering, the tempo gaining speed, the force greater until there was no other sound, nothing left of the music but a deafening whir and the vinegary taste of sadness on my tongue.
Makes me want to cry. But I'm 12. Like I'm 12 sitting in the old farmhouse where I grew up. And I can hear piano and I can think about jelly jars and cicadas and all of these memories that I have as a child of the South. I feel it. I feel the temperature of it. I can hear it. You write like it is just a sensory garden when I read. So I love that about your work. The names are there too, and they're musical and they're Southern and they sound like the church directory at the Baptist church where I grew up, you know, and I feel like I know them or I'm related to them. And I'm very interested to find out first where they come from. Where do you find the names, choose the names from? What's your process? And do they change as you're writing? Do you like try them out? Because I know what my process is. I'm curious about yours.
Yeah, well, I'm very neurotic, so that's the process. But I have to have a working title of a book before I can start to write the book, and I have to have a really good first sentence. But the naming of characters, I'm also obsessed with as well, and it really is just me. I think sometimes thinking thematically, how these names might relate to the story that I'm telling. Research, old Southern names, just things that I'm not really familiar with. I mean, I'll tell you one secret though. So the name Marlissa, when I was a boy in high school, there was a Miss Georgia named Miss Marlissa Ball, and I thought that she was just wonderful. I remember going to the Georgia pageant to see her, and she actually traveled to Cairo, Georgia, to MC some pageant. So I was just always so fascinated with her because she was such a lovely singer, and I just thought she was poised and elegant. So I stole that name from her, Marlissa Ball. But the other names, there is one family name that I stole, Annalise Newell's father, Claxton. I had a great grandfather. He was named Claxton, and he was a notorious town drunk.
Aren't they
all? And of course, I asked my mom if she minded, and she didn't, of course. So that's really the only family name that I used, and he's dead, and I don't guess he really cares.
Hey, I don't think you believe that at all based on this book. We both write about dead people more than we write about living people.
They're listening.
When I'm looking for names, I look in weird places, and author Ann Height and I talk about this a lot, and we'll call each other or we'll text each other if we find good names, and we'll watch for them on like road signs when you're driving
I
out
do that
off
too.
the highway.
I
You'll
do that
find
too.
family names that are awesome. Obituaries are the best.
Yeah.
When I know what years I'm writing in and the places that I'm writing in, I'll look at obituaries from those years and find family names. And I, mix them up usually. And then cemeteries. Walking through cemeteries is really good.
Why?
It's good stuff. Yearbooks, old yearbooks. I have looked through like my mom's old high school yearbooks, and you'll find good names.
Great names.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of years and yearbooks, you mentioned the basic reason why you set it in 1956, but I wonder if there's more to that.
It's interesting because when I took it back to 1956 on or around when Annalise Newell would have been around 11. But for me, the 1950s, I think, really is that last time in American history where when you think upon the country, you think of this perceived innocence. And really, a lot was burbling beneath the veneer of America and the South. 1956 is mid-century Georgia. It's pre-civil rights. There's lots of sexual and racial oppression going on. People are all smiles. You scratch beneath veneer. People and things aren't who and what they seem. So when you're telling a Southern Gothic story, a story laden with secrets, I just sort of like the idea of it taking place in the 1950s.
and there ain't no cell phone.
Yes, you don't have to.
And there's like no internet. And I love the idea that like everything you learn or know about in the world is on your 3 TV channels with your rabbit ears, right? Or the
Mhm.
radio or the encyclopedia set.
Yeah,
So everything, all knowledge travels a little
very
slower,
slow.
a little different, except for the town gossip,
Yeah, that goes
right?
quick.
So yeah, it's a fun way to keep secrets, I think,
Great.
or to just mess with how you think about things, what you know about the world, and the settings that you create. You know, you can really create this sort of bubble of a place that is outside of reality in a way. And I do the same thing with my settings. I like to have this insular feeling of a place. And
Yeah,
the islands, I always have
isolation.
islands. I'm on the coast. And the next book that I'm working on, I put it up in the mountains. And so, but it's still this insular little story.
So my next book takes place in the mountains.
I know. And we did not talk about this
But
beforehand. And I'm like,
but a peculiar sort of mountain.
and yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So it's weird how these things work out.
Yes.
But I like the idea of being able. I'm not going to say never, because I found that I've had to go back and eat words sometimes. But I prefer not telling a story in modern time because, as you said, it you're able to isolate the people. You're able to remove the technology. I think sometimes, especially for the Gothic and elements of the supernatural, it's easy for a reader to suspend disbelief when they're apart from current time.
Yes. Agree. So earlier, after you read, I said this, and it's funny because it's a question here, that it's very musical. I always, for my books, I hear lyrical. I think that applies to yours too. It's poetic, but it is musical. So I want to know, do you have music in your background? Because there's a lot of music in this book. I use all different kinds of art, especially in Fabled Earth. And I like music. I listen to a lot of music while I'm writing. I can't listen to it while I'm writing, but I'll have 1 or 2 songs just on replay over and over and over. I was sort of obsessed. And I know that that is the case for specific songs here.
Right.
So I wondered about music in your life and how it informs your work.
So I've always been a great admirer of people who have some exceptional ability, and I'm a lover of music. I consider myself a failed musician. I took 1 year of piano lessons. I was not any good at it. My mom reminds me that year she wasted a lot of money on piano lessons.
I cheated. I actually wrote on the piano keys
So you knew where to
with
put
a
your
pen.
fingers.
Oh, I got in a lot of trouble.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I did play. This is interesting. The one song that I learned that I played in a recital was titled Haints.
No way.
Yes. And Haints, is a southern mischievous ghost. Anne Height writes about Haints. My second book's about Haints. I don't know, that just occurred to me. So I would have done I'm not an outdoorsy sort of fella, which is interesting being from the South, but I admire nature. But I would have done anything to have gotten out of physical education. So I took band. So I was a band nerd from the 6th grade up through my senior year of high school. I played a very sexy instrument called the trombone. If you know the trombone. I wanted to play percussion, but I apparently didn't pass the right test. So I'm an admirer of music. Music is a huge part of my process. I create a playlist. I'll play music like you. I can't listen while I'm writing, but I will play a certain song to get me in the emotional mood to write a scene. So music's very important. I think the lyrical underpinning to the Cicada Tree is Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. And there's a work of music in the book, in the Cicada Tree, titled Cordelia's Sonata. And it's an engagement gift her husband commissions for her some years back before they're married. So when you read the Cicada Tree, or if you've read the Cicada Tree, when I reference Cordelia's Sonata, in actuality it is Moonlight Sonata. And there are 3 acts in the Cicada Tree. and there are 3 movements to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. So from a pacing perspective, those movements really do sort of align with the pacing of the acts in the book.
You're too smart.
That makes me sound very smart,
He's very smart.
and I'm not.
I like it. All right. I want to know, everybody always asks me this, so I'm going to cheat. I should take notes. This is being recorded, so I'll just
Okay.
use it later for myself, make myself sound smart. Everybody always asks me this question, and it's like a trick question. I don't have an answer. And I know the basic answer. You can look it up, but what do I think? I don't know, because it changes every time I think about it. What and how do you define Southern Gothic?
Yeah. I mean it
And
is. It's
I
not
find that
easy.
readers are very confused. They immediately think about, Anne Rice and vampires, and we're too far away from Flannery now for most modern readers to really go there. Or Carson, they don't think of those writers now. We do.
We do, yeah.
But I'm having a hard time explaining to contemporary readers what it is that I'm doing.
I think if I had to give an example of a really great modern Southern Gothic novel outside of your books, it would be Karen.
Which I can't define. I'm sorry.
Which would be, like Carol Russell's Swamplandia.
Yes.
Would be an example of a modern take on Southern Gothic. And I believe her books really sort of they're not historical in nature. I think that particular book takes place in what you would call modern time.
Mm-hmm.
But, really, I mean, when you think of, it's all of those writers, it's Flannery O'Connor, it's Carson McCullers. But, it's crumbling mansions, it's fading the world of the antebellum, it's elements of the supernatural, it's deeply flawed characters, elements of the grotesque. But I think that, when I think of Southern Gothic, it really is, in my writing, it's a way to balance that romanticized version of the South with the very harsh realities and troubled past of the South, racial, social, sexual, gender oppression, really. So it really is a way to work through some of those themes. And when I set out to write the Cicada Tree, I didn't set out to tell a story about race. I felt like if I was going to focus on anything, that it would be social disparity, because I understand that I've lived that. But there really is no way around not touching on race if you're writing a story in the 1950s and you're writing a story in the Southern Gothic tradition. I felt like there are other people that did it really well. I didn't feel qualified to write a story about race. I think that Sue Monk Kidd did it beautifully in The Secret Life of Bees. I think Mark Childress really touches on race in Crazy in Alabama. So I felt like, I didn't set out to do that. I felt like that had been done. But when I finished the book and stepped back from it, I had, in many ways touched upon race in a sort of circuitous, unintentional way.
So what I usually end up saying when they say, what is Southern Gothic? I say, well, it's a sneaky way of saying you're writing a book about the South that tells the truth.
Yeah.
It's real. That's real, because it's a big haunted house.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right. Oops, my questions went away. All right. Okay. The cicada plague occurs in the 3rd act. I want to know the role of the cicadas in the novel. And I have to tell you, house I grew up in, we had no air conditioning. So at night it was super quiet. There was, no noise in the house except the big box fans, because we would sleep on the floor. It would be so hot. I can remember with my siblings sleeping on the floor in the summertime with the windows open and the box fans running. But the cicadas were so loud. I grew up in Dalton. I don't hear them here like I did there growing up. And if I go to visit my parents, it felt like they were going to lift us off like a helicopter coming over the house, right? And so when I read this book, I thought about those nights and hearing all those rear noises that I'm actually kind of miss now. Like, aren't they horrible? But I miss them. It's a soothing sound. Yeah. So I want to know, because when people see this and they see cicada and they hear about this cicada plague at the end, they're either creeped out or they're like me, they're curious, because I have good memories of that too.
Yeah.
So I want to know.
Sure. Well, so I think I remember, I think I was in the third grade, there was this brood of cicadas that happened upon the south, upon Cairo. And I don't remember ever being covered up in the world like we were that summer with cicadas. So I was fascinated. We would pull the shells off the trees, we put them in our hair, on our
Yeah.
clothes. Um, we would crush them. Yeah. So it was so I was always fascinated with them, and I've always when I think back to those younger years, I think about those summer when the cicadas came. The cicadas are really interesting. They come around every year, but you have your 13-year and you have your 17-year broods. And that's sort of creepy to me that a nymph can just sort of stay underground for so long and they just know when it's time to emerge. So when I was thinking about the cicada tree, and this book that I was going to write, I really worked to sort of create this mythology around the cicada, this sense that cicadas as nymphs are lurking underneath, they're listening, and they're eating the secrets of the things that they're hearing, and they're growing until at which time, they make their ways out into the world, sing out what they know, and right wrongs. So that really is sort of the mythology that I was thinking of when I was writing the cicada tree. And I did learn some interesting facts. Do you know how the cicadas make that sound? So sometimes people think that it's crickets rubbing their legs back and forth, but it's this thing called tymbals. It's almost like a musical instrument. It's their exoskeletons moving rapidly in and out. And it's the male cicada that's making all that noise. Can you imagine that, ladies? It's sort of a mating call, then making all the racket. And the sound can make its way to the decibel of a rock concert.
I told you.
Yeah, it's crazy loud.
It was nuts, but I miss it.
Yeah, me
And
too.
when we go up to Dalton, my husband's from there too, and we'll listen and we'll say, "See, there it is. Why don't we hear it here?"
Yeah.
It's funny the things that have disappeared. That and like Bob White's, and we were talking about this the other night. Little screech owls. We don't hear those things as much
No.
where I
Well,
live now.
and when you live in the city, there's light pollution, so you really are troubled to even see the stars sometimes.
Nostalgia. You got a
Mhm.
good dose of nostalgia
In
this book.
there.
So tell us a little bit about your writing life, because earlier I thought it was funny when they were reading your bio and it's like by day. It's
Yeah,
like you're Batman.
Yeah, more Batman.
So tell us about your
Totally.
writing life.
Well, so I have a day job because I like electricity and food.
And insurance.
And insurance.
That's what my daddy
Yeah,
says.
because there are a smattering of folks that are able to make a lot of money from writing their novels. I'm far from there yet, but I'm proud to do it. So my writing life, by day I work for Easter Seals, North Georgia, and really in all the hours between I'm a writer. When I'm in the midst of a project and it's going full force, I have to get up at maybe about 4:30 in the mornings, right from 4:30 to 6:30 until I have to go to work. And then I'm a weekend writing warrior, and my favorite time to write is the weekends because I don't have the press or worry of having to go to the office over my head. So I'm an early morning writer. It's when I'm able to work. And there's something about getting up out of bed, out of that dream state that brings creativity for me. And I'm able to work through plot problems or figuring out what it is I need to do next. I have a lot of aha moments when I'm brushing my teeth or I'm shaving. It's a peculiar thing.
I'm like that in the shower.
Yes.
I think it's because there's nothing else you can accomplish really.
It will.
So your brain
Good ideas
thinks
come to
differently.
you.
And when I first wake up, like I will stay in the bed trying to not be quite awake so that I can think through something that I'm working on. And sometimes you do work it out, like
do.
in your dreams at night. That's
You
interesting.
do. Sometimes I love, before I go to bed, I love, getting into the covers. I'm like a fireplace person. So we have an electric fireplace that can either have heat or not, but I love the ambiance. I have one in my office, there's one in the bedroom. So I'll turn the fireplace on, I'll look into the flame, and I'll think about the story, what it is, where I am and what it is I think I need to do next. So I sort of drift off to sleep thinking about what I'm doing.
Do you remember your dreams?
Sometimes. My dream, it seems that the older that I get, the less I dream. And the worse my sleep has gotten. but I do. When I do dream, I do remember them.
I do too. I wondered that about other writers because and sometimes I'm able to tell that I'm dreaming in my
Yep.
dream, and it's like I'm working to change it because I'm entertaining myself. Same as like writing a book, and then I wake up and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
But I think it's the same thing we're doing. It's a waking dream when you're writing.
It is. And when
Shoot, there
and
goes
when
my
you can
questions.
get into that moment where it's not even an effort, and it doesn't
Right.
happen a lot, but it's
Mhm.
just this sort of magical, spiritual thing that happens where, it just comes to you, and it's not even as if you're in the real world in that moment.
It's true. So when I'm working on a book, I always feel like after I have this brilliant idea and I'm excited about it and I start working on it, at some point in that first draft, because I hate to draft, I like the revision part.
Me too.
I think I am not smart enough to write this book. And I have figured out over time that that's true, that I'm not. And you're not smart enough until you have written it, because you change and grow and it teaches you how to write by writing it. So I'm a little less terrified of that moment because it comes every time and I think, I have made a mess. I don't know what I'm doing. I want to know what writing this novel taught you
Mm.
and how it changed you. I don't think if we write a good book and we are delving deep, like I think you do with your fiction, it should change you, just like it should change the reader when they read it. That's the whole point, right? So I'm curious about you.
Um, yeah. So I think, well, what I've learned is that there's a lot of the subconscious at play when you're writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
Things that you don't even realize about you or your book until you're done. Um, and that happened with the Cicada Tree. I mean, I went into the Cicada Tree knowing that it was going to be a coming of age story, that, there would be these elements of obsession, of transformation, of change. Um, so I'm the oldest of four boys. So there was a sister that was born after me with spina bifida. And so she passed away when she was not quite 2. And I think maybe I was, not quite 4. But I remember it vividly because as a boy, it was my first brush and experience with death. And as a young person, up until that point, I think, if you've not had an experience with death as a child, you think that the world is a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and then if you're frightened, your parents can, help set aside your fears. But I knew that though my parents could tell me they could keep me safe, that, there were some things that they couldn't keep me from. So one of the things I realized after I wrote this book is that I think in a way I also told a story of sisterhood, and just I get emotional when I think about this, and we talked about this. Um, that in some ways I think maybe I gave my sister an opportunity to live life in many iterations of girl in the characters in this book. So I think that
Yep.
that's what probably I learned most.
See, this is where we were sitting together, and I'm a surviving twin, and my twin died the day after I was born, and it's in all my books. So we both write about that. We
Mhm.
both write about survivor's guilt
Yeah.
and ghosts, right? And this idea that there's life and there's death, and neither side is necessarily a horror,
Yeah.
right? There's beauty to both. And it's so interesting to me that we find that in all of our books, and
We
that
do.
is the theme that we just keeps knocking on the door, knocking on the door.
And they say that
And you don't know. I
you
didn't
don't
know I
know
was
that you're
putting that in
doing
there.
it. Me
Mm-mm.
either. Well, I did not. I don't know if I told you this. I did not realize that until the whole thing about sisterhood. I was on my way driving home to Cairo, Georgia, where I grew up, to have an event at the Roddenberry Memorial Library, the library that I went to when I was a boy. It's a beautiful library that was donated by a wealthy family in Cairo. And you and I were texting, and I was not driving. I was just kicking back, enjoying the ride, but we were talking about this very thing. And there's something that you said in the text that triggered that, where I had that aha moment, like, oh, I've written a book about sisterhood.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's very true. So I think on that heartfelt note, we will open up for questions and see if anybody else has something they'd like to know.
As a New Englander, listening to you read that portion from your book, it was melodious, it was southern, it was amazing to me. But do you picture something first? Do you, almost like a movie, do you have a movie in your head that you write about? Or do you write something and then that creates that movie?
I mean, I think I see it as I write it. So there's always this vision of the world, that I'm trying. I have the vision of the world that I try to express on the page. So, and that's the hardest part, I think, digging in, finding truth on the page. But yes, from a visual perspective, I do have a sense of of where it is that I am, a strong sense of place before I start to write.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
The next book. Will any of these characters be in there?
No, no. I'm asked that question sometimes if I, would write a follow-up to the Cicada Tree, and
Annalise's story's not over, I don't think.
no. I mean, I still think about the characters still, and I will say this. I think that if I wrote another book, I think with these characters, I think that Marlissa, and her grandmother would make their way back to Providence, Georgia, to reclaim, their home Mistletoe. And that's just sort of the premise I'm thinking. That would cause certainly a lot of conflict. But for me, it seems really hard to write a series, and I can't even imagine how hard it would be to be able to write a book to stand alone, but you have to bring the reader up to speed on what you previously read. That just seems exhausting to me. I mean, maybe I could pull it off. I don't know, but I don't. Yeah, so I'm not touching on these characters, but the next book is titled Sing Down the Moon, and it's Southern Gothic. It's elements of magical realism, some threads of fantasy in it, and it's coming out with Mercer University Press on or around this time next year. I'm really excited about it. It's a peculiar book. It's a peculiar book.
That's a word that I have on a Post-it note in my office, pinned.
Peculiar.
Peculiar.
That's a good word.
Your words are beautiful, and thank you so much for touching on the writing process. I was also wondering about how do you make sure your words survive the editing process? And can you talk about the whole publishing, uh, how you get that far?
Well, I mean, the world of publishing is paved with heartache and lots of gatekeepers.
And medication.
Yeah, medication. Like, and booze. No. Um, it's challenging. It's funny. I spoke the first time ever. I was a keynote speaker for a writers group this past weekend, and I talked about the fact that I'd gotten an agent. You think that when you get an agent, that the heavens open up, and the angels will sing. That's just only one. It's only one gatekeeper. At the end of when it was all said and done, the agent did not sell this book. I did. So things don't happen the way that you think that they're going to happen. But I think in many ways, for me, it happened the way that it needed to happen for this first book out. Kimberly, you came up with a small press much like I did. And I think that when you're getting your footing, your bearings, I think that one of the pluses of being with the small press is that they don't have huge sales expectations for you within those first few weeks. So for them, it's a longer game. So if you can do well within the year, that's great. That's been a success. So I didn't have that pressure of having to endure reviews, right? Because that in itself is an emotional erosion. Luckily, a lot of people say some good things, but there are a few people that don't say good things. So there's the whole mental health aspect of preparing yourself as a debut novelist to live through those things. But I'm diverging from what you had asked, but it seemed for me to happen as it needed to happen. There are many paths to publication. If you are an aspiring writer, you can do it yourself. There's small presses. There are larger presses. There are many gatekeepers. You can go agented or unagented. But it is an exercise, I think, in perseverance and hope.
She asked how your words survived the
How
editing
my work
process
survive.
too.
Okay. So you have to kill a lot of your darlings. I think that you can write a masterpiece, but you have to be okay with letting it go. For the second book, I'd gone through one sort of round of developmental edits where they came back with some notes on some things, wanting to know that I would consider. Nothing significant, in all things that I felt would serve the story well. But one of the things that they said was, well, we think it's a little too long, the book. So I think I was at 135,000 words. Contractually, I needed to be to 125,000 words, but I was able to reduce it to 95,000 words. So that's a significant amount of chop. But I had to go back through with an editorial eye, thinking, okay, am I just being self-serving here, or is what I've written here really serving the story? So it's not a painful process for me to let go of the words. I think that if you trust the people that you're surrounded with, and you know and understand that they want you to get the best product out in the world that you can, then I'm certainly open to any and all feedback. And especially when you're new on the scene, I'm just very much yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir. What is it that you need me to do? And I've not been asked to do anything I felt that compromised my my values or morals as a writer.
I also think when you write Southern Gothic, ain't nothing ever dead.
That's
So
true.
like if you cut it,
You
it
can
can
use
go
it
somewhere
later.
else. And I think it was hardest for me with my first book, because you feel like, what if I never get another chance? This is the one I have to say it all. And at some point you realize, well, there'll be another book, and I can put this in another work, or in another article, or I'll put this somewhere. I just need to tuck it away. So you start to feel less angst about every little thing.
Yeah.
Some things I have taken a stand on keeping in, and then some things I come around and let go of. So.
Did they ask you about, I was asked about the smaller presses, they want you to have 150,000 followers on social media?
No, I mean that's a lot. I think that one of the things that they expected from me with the first book is that there was a social media following. I had to develop a plan, a marketing promotional plan, because they said very clearly up front that we're very small, we don't have the bandwidth to do that. We can put together a nice product for you, but you'll be the one that will need to sell it. So it was pretty. No one's and I do not have 150,000 followers, so please follow me on Facebook and social media. It would very much be
How many we got here? We'll know exactly who did it and who didn't.
Exactly. My numbers better go. I already know I've got some friends here who follow me. But no, I don't think that, I think that's a big ask.
Let's give a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.